Welcome back to the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. Today I'm speaking with Sonia, a women's empowerment advocate, and Sonia talks to me about normalising the norm. She's on a mission to empower women, and this all comes after a traumatic event which happened to her in 2021. We both talk about our breakdowns in this episode and that lowest point and how we overcame that, what got us through those times. And Sonia talks about how she was diagnosed with high functioning anxiety and how she lost herself and her purpose in life. She talks here about her experience of having timeline therapy, which of course is something I'm a big advocate for. And she talks about how the traumatic event and everything that happened after that has changed her whole life now and how she's looking forward to a more positive future. This was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with Sonia. She also has her own podcast, which I do recommend checking that out too. But in the meantime, enjoy this episode with Sonia. I'd love it if you could hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed already, you can do so and you'll be notified when the next episode goes out. Hi, Sonia. So, thank you so much for coming on the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast and for sharing your story. We're going to be talking about lots of subjects that I know people might be able to relate to, and also your story. Everyone has their own unique story, and I'm just looking forward to hearing a bit more about yours. I know we've already spoken. So you talk a lot about, normalizing the norm, and you're just on a mission to empower women, but that all came from a traumatic event in 2021. So do you want to tell me a bit about what life was like leading up to that? Yeah, and then about the event that sort of led you to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on here. It is actually
No.
my first appearance on a podcast, so it's so lovely, and thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I guess for myself, I had a vision a few years ago to, do something in terms of like building something for mental health support, particularly for women. And I kind of saw the vision where it would start off on Instagram and it could be something really amazing. And I feel at the time, it wasn't. There's a lot of people that do that type of thing now, there's a lot of us, we've got a whole little team going on of people that are like sort of promoting and cheerleading it, if you like. But back then there wasn't really anybody. And I remember like thinking, oh, it would be amazing. There's something missing here. People need the support. And me personally, I've been through a lot of trauma since, growing up, childhood as well. And I think the biggest motivation for me has always been, I wish that I had someone like me when I was in my 20s, when I was growing up, to be like, you know what? I've been there, I've been through it. Let me put my arm around you. Let me hold you while you can't hold yourself. And I think that goes a long way. And I look back and I think, gosh, I wish I had people like me or you that could have helped and really, really
Yeah.
like give me that support and that direction when I felt so alone and lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, yes, back then, like I said, a few years ago, I felt like it was something that I wanted to do and could I do it? And, the what ifs and talking yourself out of it and things like that. But it really was a few years later where, like you said, I had quite a traumatic event. Something happened in my personal life that really, really caused me to have quite a severe breakdown. And I think it was quite traumatic. And whilst that was really difficult, and I did have a breakdown, and I was in such a low point in my life because of that event, I also think I got to a point where like I found some strength from somewhere, and it was almost like, well, if I've had my breakdown now and I'm in this position, why don't I just try and work on all the other stuff because the mask has fallen off. I'm already like feeling low. So I started to navigate through some of the other things that I felt held me back in life, letting go of things that were not mine to hold on to. And it started this whole process. And when I was going through it, once I saw that turnaround, I started to do things like a counselling qualification, mental health, and it was almost like there was a little bit of she's back, and I was starting to like build myself back up. But I just thought, you know what? I felt a little bit like because of the trauma and what I'd been through, this is my second chance, and you feel like you've kind of rose again type thing. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of think like, how would I want to live my life? How do I want to show up? What do I want to do? And I just thought, you know what? I thought about it all them years ago and I didn't do it. I'm going to do it now. And I just thought, you know what? Now's the time. And that's where I created the Say It With Grace platform. And the reason behind the name Say It With Grace, because my name is not Grace, by the way, disclaimer. My name's Sonia, obviously. And the reason behind it was a lot of things have happened in life with family members, friends, relationships, workplaces. And I believe that, you can achieve a lot, you can have boundaries, self-respect, stick up for yourself, but it's how you communicate, how you do it, how you deliver it. And through the process of what I went through, the important thing to me that stood out was that I needed to handle everything with grace.
Mm.
And I really think that you can achieve things and you can stick up for yourself and have a backbone. And, you know, we unfortunately there's a lot of work to still be done in terms of it being a man's world. And I think you can do anything you want. And that's what stood out to me throughout. So I wanted to teach other people that actually you can be a mum, you can be a friend, a sister, you can have a career. If you've got these dreams, like go for them. And,
Mm.
life is a special occasion, do it now. And that sort of like empowering energy, I think. And I just wanted to, if I could fill, a jar and give it to people, I would. But unfortunately, you can't, and that's not the way the world works. And I guess that's why we're here and we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. And I was the same. It's funny you say you had that spark, and you didn't have that at first. Well, I don't know, but I know for me when I hit my breakdown, my lowest point, which was about 12 years ago now, and obviously you feel like you're just completely lost, you can't see a way out,
Yeah,
but eventually this little drive in me started to come into the surface, and that's so I think anyone who is, at that low point just now, just for them to hear that there does come that point where your
we do.
spark will come back, or that drive, or wherever that is for you,
Yeah,
it's in there. And once you hit that lowest point, you'll start to feel that spark, and that's you starting to come back to yourself. So I
yeah.
think that was, I'm glad that you mentioned that you had that in you as well, because I relate to that too.
Definitely, and I think like a lot of people can relate, and I know personally people around me that there is a handful of people that are going through something now that's really life changing and something that's making them question everything, and they
Mm-hmm.
potentially are at that rock bottom that we were once at. And I can't stress enough that it doesn't last forever and it is temporary. And I do think
Mm-hmm.
as well with trauma and things that you go through, there's got to be some positives that come out of it. Otherwise, what was it all for? And that really is my motivation as well. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that we've been handed some of the cards that we have, but if we can take one or two positives out of it and do something amazing, then that's something, isn't it?
Mm. And to feel it as well. So what, the traumatic event that you had, and any what, we hit a breakdown for a reason. There's a
Yeah,
reason why. And rather than trying to suppress that or masking it, or turn into something to try and, maybe alcohol or drugs or whatever it
yeah,
may be, just sit with it and feel it. And it's awful. It feels horrendous. It's uncomfortable. You cry, you scream, but once you work all of that, because it's not just in your mind, it's in your body as
yeah.
well. Were you present in that moment? Would you say that you were aware? Did you have an awareness that it wasn't just in your mind, but it was in your body as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It was mentally and physically, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Mm-hmm.
the day to day was so difficult, and sometimes even just trying to get out of bed and things like that. And you do feel
Mm-hmm.
like this is just your life now. There is that
Mm-hmm.
moment, isn't there, that time where you think this is just it
Yeah.
for me now. And, you think to myself, am I just gonna live my life being a broken person? And,
Yeah.
I just want to say for the listeners that there is a breakthrough moment. There is a point where like you get over that hurdle, and when you come over the other side you start to see the light. You do, honestly.
Yeah.
And then once you have that, it's quite empowering, actually, I think. And once that point
Mm-hmm.
comes, it's like it just then carries on from there. But it's really difficult for us to say now, I know, because when you look back, yeah, it's such a difficult time, and the emotions that you go through, and it is a whole process of different feelings and emotions along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you say, I mean, well, back then, 12 years ago, there I didn't know who to speak to. There wasn't really social media; it wasn't a big thing. So I didn't see any coaches or help or motivational speakers around, uplifting me. So I did feel very alone.
Yeah.
I think now you do at least have, there's so much out there, thankfully, and so many people and podcasts and speaking about this type of thing. So yeah, but yeah, what you were saying there, obviously, just get to give people hope that yes, it doesn't feel very good at the time, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel, always.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't wish hardship or trauma on people, but some of the things that happened in the past to me, I even say to my friends that are going through difficult separations and things like that now, you don't believe it now and you can't see it, but this is the best thing that happened to you. Like somebody's
Mm-hmm.
doing you a favor because so much good will come from this, and you don't see it when you're in it, but later on when you look back, you're like, wow, that was the making of me. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
for some of the things I've been through, I wouldn't wish it on people. But when I look back, I'm like, some of it was the making of who I am now. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you can go through situations where you think, if this didn't happen, I'd have been there now and I'd have been doing this and I would have achieved that. Well, actually, I wouldn't be who I am now. And honestly, like what I've achieved and what I've done is pretty damn special. And I'll say that.
Mm-hmm. I always like to think for myself, but I think this is what I believe to be true is that life is happening for you, not to you.
Yeah, yeah,
But it can feel like it's happening to you if you resist it.
yeah.
That's when it starts to feel hard and challenging.
Hmm.
If you can try and observe it, and because I mean it's up to us if we let external factors, we can't control what happens, externally or to us or how people behave towards us, but we can control how we respond or how, in our minds how we think
Yeah,
about that
absolutely. I
situation.
agree completely. I really do. And I think as well, like the way I see it as well, I heard this on a podcast once where it was like, imagine thinking that you were put on this earth and you were given the experience and opportunity to experience every emotion, every feeling, every
Mhm.
experience there is. If you were then told, actually, no, we're going to give you a limited experience, you'd feel hard done by. Like it's a blessing. It's a blessing to
Yeah,
be here and experience everything that you do in the time that you're here, actually.
yeah. And I always say there's no such thing as a negative emotion. It's just
No,
an emotion. Some of them feel good, some of them don't feel so good. It's just your body's way of communicating with you. And again, suppressing it, it's just going to come out in another way. Which is just like a cycle. It's going to continue until you sit with it.
I agree completely. And I think part of it for me as well, like in my family, I'm one of four and I'm the oldest sibling. And I've always felt like I've got to look after everybody else. And I don't know where it started. And I've been asked in the past, like, when did you feel so responsible for others? And I was like, I don't remember because it's all I know. And there was something
Mm,
that obviously started as a child, or, when you're a child, you absorb and you're a sponge, aren't you? But something obviously started it where it's felt like it's an expectation. And with that in mind, I've always had like a mask. I've always felt like I've got to be strong and I've got no other choice. And
mm,
it's only when I've realized, when I've been through something that's obviously triggered me or knocked me, that the mask falls off. I'm like, actually, there's a lot underneath that needs to be dealt with and it needs to be unpicked, and that plaster needs to come off actually. Because all you end up
mm,
doing is like covering it and covering it and cover it. And then, like I said, something quite traumatic happened to me and it all just fell off.
mhm. And you talk about in your podcast, you say that after this traumatic event, you lost your purpose. Do you want to talk a bit about that and what the process of that was and how you came out the other side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like I was working full time, I was really successful. I'd really worked my way up quite quickly, actually. I used to say once upon a time ago I was very lucky, but actually you're not lucky. You're the one who makes it happen. It's you as a
Mhm,
person. You're the one who works hard. Um, and I think like I'd got so busy, like working all the time and being in a successful career, and I think like when you've not got children or you're not married and things like that, there's no reason to say no as well. Like it's always yes, and staying extra hours committing, and you're always that person that just stays behind and things like that. And I think, when I did get poorly and I wasn't too well, it felt like, oh, what do I do now? Because that was my identity and that's kind of who I was and that's what everyone knew me for. And oh, that expectation, especially being from like an Indian background and culture. Oh, she's got a really good job, she's a manager, she earns this much money. And it made me realize that one, it's not everything actually, and there's way more than a job title and a salary. And also it made me realize that what I'm actually doing for myself and what is my identity, who am I? So it's almost
mhm,
like I was learning from scratch again, who am I as a person? And I think that's when I
mhm,
kind of realized that like I've got way more to give the world than what I am doing.
mhm,
And I think for me it felt that the journey I'm on now, it helps me to deal with my own traumas and things I've been through, because I only post and share and talk about things that I feel like I've dealt with, I've been there, or I'm dealing with it now and it's happening. I won't be a
mhm,
person that posts because I think that's what people are like and that's what they want to see. Most of what I post, I'm going through or I've been through. And I just
mhm,
realized that, like, like I said earlier, it can't all be for nothing what you go through. And I think a lot of things, like I've been knocked down, I've been knocked back, there's been expectations as a woman in Indian culture. In our culture it's very much all about the boys, and it's still not where it should be in that sense. And I've really had to fight to go and get my education, to stop putting everyone else first and start putting myself first. And I think just realizing that actually I've got a lot that I can do to help others break barriers and to like be the best version of themselves, and women that put themselves last and everybody else first. So I think I really found my purpose from that when there was that turnaround point. And when I started to realize that and recognize it, the opportunities started to come as well. So it's like when you believe it, you see it, you visualize it, then you believe it and start putting little feelers out, like doing the counseling course, the mental health. Then the opportunities started to come as well. And it gave me that, I wanted to throw myself into something was for me.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the opportunities are always there, aren't they?
Yeah,
It's just that I guess you'd done the work and you were able to see them, you were focused on them. Yeah, I believe that as well.
absolutely,
Uh,
definitely.
you mentioned that you were after this traumatic event, you were diagnosed with high functioning anxiety. Is anxiety something you'd suffered with before, or was this completely new to you?
It was completely new to me, to be honest. I think a couple of years ago I'd had like one or two panic attacks where I felt like I couldn't breathe, but they were like really one-off. But I think because through the trauma and incident I went through, I really withdrew from society. I stopped seeing people. I stopped leaving the house. I became fearful of leaving the house. I really like sort of isolated myself as well, which didn't help. And I'm a person like I'm a high achiever. Like I always say, like when you're at school and you get the high achievers at school that always do really well. I always say I'm like a high achiever in life. I always need to be doing something to feel good. And to have that stripped away and taken away from you. But actually, part of it was my own doing as well because I really withdrew myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I started to have panic attacks when I did go out in public and worrying about who I'm going to see and what's going to happen and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
even when I got myself a new job and I moved on with my life and things like that, I started having episodes where I'd over panic and over worry, and I'd think about what ifs of things that would never happen, and I felt like I'd become a bit of a shell of myself, really. And when you kind of say the term high function anxiety, it's because on the exterior, nobody would really know, and I'd still function as myself if people saw me from the outside. But inside, it was like, when you see the swans on the water and they're like so graceful on top of the water, and underneath they're like paddling away. It was a bit like that, really. But that went on for like a year, and it becomes so exhausting, and I was just tired of it. And I felt like as a person it's just so draining on you, and I'd worry so much about things, and I'd get worked up, and I'd be crying all the time as well. And I think close friends around me like recognized it, and very lucky to have a really good network of people. And one of my friends said, look, I wouldn't advise this if I didn't think it was worth it. But she actually put me in touch with a lady that offers like therapy, like hypnosis and things like that. And she just said, like, look, I wouldn't advise this if I didn't think it was worth it. So go for it. And I was at the
Mm-hmm.
point where I felt like I'll try anything because I was just so exhausted and so unwell. Um, anyway, I went to this lady and she's actually an NLP practitioner. Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I said that right. And honestly, she changed my life actually. I think sometimes I'd say that she saved my life. She also saved my friend as well, who had advised me to go to her. And my friend's a real introvert, like she doesn't really get involved in these types of things, or she doesn't always accept she needs help. So I was like, okay, she's telling me to go. This must be something really special.
Mm-hmm.
And what we actually did was timeline therapy.
Which
Uh,
I do as well.
which
Yeah.
you do, yeah, yeah. I've never heard of anybody else that does it, so it's pretty special that we have connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess like you'll tell the listeners better than me a bit about it if you want to at this point.
I would rather hear, yeah, I mean, I'll hear your experience and
Okay,
that, yeah, I'm happy to
that's
type in.
fine. Yeah. So I guess when I went to the lady, her name's Helen actually. I know she wouldn't mind me sort of mentioning her name. I went to her and I was like blurting out everything I've been through and all things that I think she should know. And I found it really strange because we never talked about those things again. Because I think you assume a bit naive that it's just going to be like a therapy counselling type session where you blurt everything out. And she's like, okay then. And when she started to go into these practices and processes, I was like, I must admit, I was a little bit on the fence about whether it was going to work, or is this something I'll get something from, and is she going to be able to fix me, that sort of thing. But honestly, it was amazing. It was incredible. And Helen took me through the timeline therapy at different points of my life. So, childhood, my teen years, and then sort of like my 20s, and then now. And every time she took me through, we did the same process. It was the same thing that she taught me through as I had my eyes closed. And every time it was a different experience of how I felt.
Mm,
And some of
mm,
it, I actually felt the weight physically dropping off me. It was
mhm.
like the most surreal experience ever. But honestly, I'd say I think I must have had 2 sessions, maybe 3 sessions. And again, at the beginning, she was like, I think you'll have like 2 sessions and, we'll see how you get on. And I'm like, I was really unsure. But honestly, I would say that I don't want to say I hate when people say my anxiety because it's not mine to own. I would say it was like functioning at like 100%, like it was who I was. It had become who I was as a person. And I'd say that I was down to about 20%. Honestly,
Mhm,
I,
mhm.
I can't recommend it enough to people. Like, it's really hard to explain it and say to somebody exactly what it is. Like, you can't put it in a
Mhm.
jar and pass it to somebody. But it
Yeah.
it was for me, it was life changing. It really was.
The experience will be different for everyone
Well,
because
that's
everyone's
the other thing.
experience is different. Yeah. Yeah. But what she was doing when she was taking you through, the different ages, it was emotions that she was tackling.
Yeah.
So anger, sadness, fear. Um, obviously each one might it could have been the same event, it could have been the same age, but yeah, it's different for everyone. So you found that it was different ages that she was taking you back to.
It was, and I think that was based on my experiences and the traumas that I've been through. So that's unique to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like saying, "Oh, would you be able to like send me the notes of like what we talked about and things like that afterwards?" Because I was a bit worried that I'm not going to absorb it all because it was quite overwhelming at the same time. And Helen was like, "Well, I can do." She's like, "But you're never going to look at them ever again." And I was like, "It's just powerful. It's so powerful." And I've heard
Mm-hmm.
people say before, "Oh yeah, like it's a form of hypnosis or something." And I'm like, you have to experience it to see what it is.
Yeah.
Like it's incredible. And because I work for West Midlands Ambulance Service, and Helen came and did a bit of a workshop for our Women's Network Day. And I actually stood up and was like, this lady saved my life, like honestly, because I'd become a shell of who I was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was an absolutely amazing experience, and I would highly recommend it.
I'm really happy to hear that you did have a lovely experience. I'm not surprised. Yeah, I'm not surprised, but I'm really glad that helped you. And of course, you also had your SAD diagnosis that you've had since you were 15 as well. So did that help? Did it help with that in any way? Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Um, I think at that time that wasn't really not an issue, but like that wasn't really impacting me because this was like in the summertime. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so with SAD, like I don't know if like any of the listeners will resonate or understand what it is, but SAD is seasonal affective disorder. So it's something that occurs in the winter months, and it's where there's an imbalance in the daylight that you're getting, the melatonin, a lack of serotonin and things like that, and vitamin D. And you know how, like, when we go to sleep at night or it starts to get dark, you start to naturally feel tired, don't you? Or like if you're in a plane and they're like, right, it's nighttime mode and they switch everything off, you naturally start to feel tired and sleepy. But because the days are shorter and we've got a lack of daylight, your something in your body is in your brain is switching to think that it is sleep time, so it affects your mood, your energy levels. You have, like this sort of loss of wanting to do things or be part of something. It is a form of depression. And like you mentioned, I was diagnosed when I was 15. I used to just get upset and cry all the time and feel really down. I didn't know why. So my
Mm-hmm.
dad took me to the doctors, and the doctor told me, "This is what you've got." Handed me some Prozac and was like, "Bye, see you later." I never got any support with it. Never told exactly what it is. It was really, really brief. Um, didn't give me any indication of like what I could do to help myself without taking medication, because it's not the first answer really for me. I think personally it should be like a last resort. There is other things that you can try, and it was just never spoken about again. And I went with my dad at the time, and he wasn't helpful either. So I never really knew for many years. Like I didn't understand what it was. And I think even in recent years now, there's more of an understanding and there's things that can help. But I did recently put on my Instagram about struggling with it, and a lot of people like yourself didn't really know what it was either. But it can make you feel like, like really get inside your own head. It really can.
Mhm.
Um, I think for me, this year, I feel like the year's flying by, but it it kicked in a lot sooner than I wasn't prepared, and it just took me by surprise. And I feel like I just went headfirst into depression mode, and I really wasn't feeling good. I was questioning everything I was doing in life, not sleeping very well. I don't sleep very well anyway, but I think it got worse. Um, but if I'm honest, one of the best things for me has been, I mean, I'm still working through it, but actually telling people that I'm struggling. Like when I told
Yeah.
people on Instagram, I can't tell you how many people reached out to me, how many people were like, "Have you tried this? Have you tried that?" There was a lady that recommended a Lumi lamp that you can get on Amazon, and I've
Mm.
bought that because you try anything when you're struggling, and honestly, it's
Mhm.
brilliant. So you plug it in, you set the time as normal, and at night time you can put it on sunset, so it'll have like a really bright light, and then it'll go down as if the sun's going down. And then in the morning, my alarm goes off at 6, if you like, and for half an hour, it will slowly, gradually bring the sun up. So you've had that like source of sun in the morning when you're getting up. And it has honestly made a big difference for me. That has having that like boost of light and that
Mhm.
mimicking feeling as if like it's daylight,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of other things that have helped because I imagine there's some people that either have suffered or are or kind of think, oh,
Mhm.
hang on a minute, this sounds familiar to something I'm dealing with. For me, I like to get out in the morning for a morning walk if I can. I think, having that contact with real daylight is really good. Um, Another thing that I've started doing that really helps, I think with the SAD and with anxiety, in the morning I'll put the kettle on and I'll go to the back door and I'll literally just hold my cup and just inhale the air, like just 10 times, inhale and exhale, and having that again, like, contact with
Mhm.
fresh air.
Nature. Yeah, we just need that connection with nature as
Yeah,
well.
that's
Yeah.
it. That's my love language anyway. I have to be out in nature. If I work from home all day and I'm
Yes.
sat inside, I feel like climbing the walls, But
Yeah.
I also am very lucky because I can't tell you how helpful people on this platform have been, and particularly like people like yourself that are doing something, in some ways similar and things like that. There's a lady that I've met online, and I just happened to say that I was struggling a little bit, and she actually put on an online sort of like meditation for me, and we did it live, and other people joined, and she also did like a journaling afterwards, and she really kind of encouraged me to focus on the things that I like about this time of year and writing them down. And since then, I do focus more in everyday life on the things that I do actually like about this time of year rather than thinking it's so negative.
Mhm. Mhm. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's shifting your focus. One of the things I speak about a lot is you always have two options, two windows, if you like, if you want
Hmm.
an analogy, two windows that that you have in front of you to focus on. Sometimes our default is the one that's maybe a bit negative and everything goes wrong and things don't feel very good, but there is always that other one there. Sometimes we just have blocks or maybe limiting beliefs as well, where
Oh,
we
yeah.
can't see that other window, but it's always there for us to see.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, that inner voice is always there, isn't it? I think another
Mm.
thing for me as well is like psychologically, I think this makes a big difference. So I mainly work from home. So actually getting up and getting dressed as if I was going to the office. So I do a lot of like dopamine dressing and things like that. So I will fully get dressed now for work and I make an effort whether I'm at home or not. And that makes a big difference to how I feel in myself and as a person. So I feel like that's really psychological as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you did get to a stage where you did want to start empowering other women. So you've got the Say It With Grace podcast, and obviously your social media where you speak out a lot, and you're very open and vulnerable as well. That's really brave, I think, to get to that point where you can share. So yeah, do you want to talk a bit about the podcast, what it's about, what you talk about on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the podcast, Say It With Grace podcast, I am running a series at the moment called the Influential Women Series. And what it is I want to give other women an opportunity to join the podcast as a guest and share their story. So just to inspire other people, but also give them a platform to empower them to share the story and what they're about and what their journey's been about as well. So that's
Mm-hmm.
been really exciting. I think we're like 12 episodes in now. So every other episode is with a different guest and very different journeys and backgrounds and things like that. But then in between, I do an episode as well that's a little bit about me and things that I've been through. Because I feel like I really like to have the guest episodes all about them and they do most of the talking. And then I'm like, oh, I don't really get a chance to say anything. And I like to talk too. So I'm like, in between, it's quite nice for them to hear personally about me and my journey too. But yeah, it's brilliant. Again, it was something that I kept thinking about, and I was like, oh, but what if this, what if that, and thinking about buying all the equipment, and then what if it doesn't work? And you know what? I did a women's empowerment course at work. I was really fortunate to do this course. And they actually encouraged me. They were like, if you don't make a plan, you don't set the goal, put a time and date on it, it just becomes an intention and like you don't actually do anything with it. And you know, when I rolled it out, I thought it's not going to be perfect, but you've got to start somewhere. It's such a simple process, like honestly, and it's brought me so much joy. But the women that I've been able to bring to the platform and how much it's helped others has been incredible.
Mm-hmm. So what do you want to do with the podcast then and the work that you're doing now? What's the goal with your vision and your purpose?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of people ask me, what do you do? Like, what's your title? And it's like, well, in that sense, I don't really have, I feel like I do so many things. So it really is empowering women. So for me, I'm an empowerment coach.
Mm-hmm.
So just to empower women to be the best version of themselves, really.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for now, for me, the main thing was I wanted to build a brand. So I wanted to build a brand that everybody can identify and resonate with, but people to know me for that brand. And I feel like I'm at that point now where people are like, I thought of you and I wore the dress and I just went for it and I booked the flight and I just did this and I always sort of say that like life is a special occasion, like live it for now, just go for it. Don't wait for the
Mm-hmm.
rainy day and when the right moment comes and whatnot. So I guess for me it's empowerment coaching really. Yeah, I'm at the point now where I'm like, right, okay, we've established the brand, you've got an amazing following, you've touched so many lives, what next? So to be honest, I am already thinking about what next.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very blessed actually because I've been working for the ambulance service for about 13 months now. I work in HR and about 6 months or so into the role, they found out about the Say It With Grace platform and my podcast and things like that. And they did like an International Women's Day at work because we've got a women's network as well. And they asked me to be a guest speaker and tell my story. So I went along and I did not realise how big of an event it was. Like the chief of the ambulance service was there, the head of HR, all my colleagues were there, all these directors, and I was like, oh my goodness, and after that, they actually asked me to be the vice chair of the Women's Network. So I've got quite a big role in my day job as well, but I'm very blessed in the sense I get to do what I love and what I'm passionate about in my day job and in my personal time with this hobby, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So everything's unfolding the way that you hoped it would.
I think so, and I think it really did stem from that huge trauma happening and everything really, well and truly falling off, and me just having to start again from scratch. But my life is so different to how it possibly would have been if I didn't go through these traumas and these things didn't happen to me. And, I probably wouldn't change it for anything now, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm. That's what we always say, isn't it? I feel the same. At that point, I remember the point where I was praying to whoever was up there just not to wake up in the morning.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and obviously that was the lowest point. But now, like you just said, best thing that could have ever happened. I would never have changed my life if that. awful time hadn't happened.
Absolutely, and I think when I was in the situation prior to the trauma happening, there was some days where I was like, I'd just prefer not to get up in the morning, or not wake up in the morning than deal with this, you know? So somebody
Mhm.
out there, you know, was like, you know what, we're getting you out of this, and it might be painful for a while, and it might be not so pleasant, but now I'm like, that needed to happen actually for all this good to come afterwards.
Mhm. And sometimes it makes us appreciate life more when we hit those really awful times, and as awful as it feels at the time, you then appreciate when it gets good.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if it happens again, you know that you've overcome it before. So it's almost like a lesson for, you know, when you've got those tools, those, you know, that mindset, mentality now to cope with if it happens again.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I believe that as well. Because sometimes we go through other things and you're like, I can't do this, or you're having a really bad day. And you're like, hang on a minute, look at everything that I have overcome and what I did. Because I think we don't
Mm-hmm.
give ourselves enough credit, do we, for like the things that we have overcome as well. So, no, I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree with that as well.
Hmm. And honoring past versions of yourself for what they did get you through as well, rather than being hard on ourselves, you know, just looking back and each version of you has actually gotten you to where you are now.
100%. And I am a big believer, and I haven't always been, in celebrating yourself, rewarding yourself. And you know what? Not just for the days where things go really well, for the days where they don't go so well, because you actually still got through it. And that takes, you know, guts and courage and bravery. And people must think
Mhm.
like she has a bad day, she celebrates and rewards herself. She has a good day. But you know what? Why not? Like we should. We're the most important
Mhm.
person in our lives. So we should. And I really, really do promote that. And I'm a big
Mhm.
believer in, you know, the small things. Like for years I'd be like, oh, my birthday, I just want someone to buy me flowers. I want them to do this. And now I'm like, actually, I can buy myself the flowers. Like I
Mhm.
genuinely every week I go out and buy myself the flowers, because why not? Like I'm not gonna wait for someone else to do it. Like I'm gonna do it
I
myself.
did too. I did that too.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's so nice. It's such a great form of self-care. And it's really like empowering and liberating, because you can spend your life waiting for a man or something to buy you the flowers, and you're like, well, actually, I can just go buy them myself, you know?
Mhm.
I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. I always have done, and even after launching my own podcast, I still always listen to other ones. And when I'm working, sometimes I listen away. And this really stood out to me today. And funnily enough, I've just got it written on a post-it note, so I thought I'd share it. My fears are only going to continue to show me what I am capable of. And I just think that's
Mhm.
such a strong, impactful quote. Some of the difficult times I went through and the times what I thought I wouldn't get through, things like quotes, like they went a long way for me. I'm such a visual
Mhm.
person anyway, but I sometimes would wake up and think, you know what, like just seeing a certain quote or something that resonated really helped me get through. And even now, like all around my desk, I've got like little cards with quotes and things like that, because sometimes you just need to look at them at that right moment, don't you, to keep you
Mhm.
going.
Mhm. My favorite is Dance with the Fear.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. I've not heard that one before, but that's really beautiful, actually.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then also Brené Brown, I think, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Mhm.
That's it. That's yeah,
The fear will be there. The
yeah,
fear is always going to be there in front of you. It's whether or not, you know, you take action in spite of it.
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And you know, there's been times in life where I felt really stuck and like I'm not going anywhere and what am I doing? And it really is because you're not giving yourself opportunity to grow. Because like you know your
Mhm.
comfort zone's a great place, but nothing grows there. So sometimes
Mhm.
fear and different emotions and you know that what if and things have to come to push you on to that next stage in your life.
Mhm. Yeah. And what about you for the future then? Because obviously you're doing all this work, your podcast, your social media, everything that you're doing to empower other people now. Is there anything in the future that you're longing for that's just for you?
Ooh, hmm. I think for me, I think for me personally, I just think when it's all said and done, I want to know that I made a difference when I was here, you know? And I want to think that some of the things that I put in place and some of the things that I promoted and was an advocate of, like, carry on thereafter, you know? I guess like the
Mhm.
legacy that I left behind.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your journey, for being vulnerable again. And I know that people will resonate with what you've said. I will leave all details below, and for people that might want to get in touch with
Yeah,
you, I
absolutely. Thank
highly
you.
recommend. come and listen to your podcast as well.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure too. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Sonia.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. All details on how to contact Sonia and her podcast, everything is in the description below. I will also put a link here on Timeline Therapy if that's something that you would like to explore yourself. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love if you could do so. You'll be notified when the next episode comes out.